Hello students, I hope you are all fine and in good health. In this audio presentation, I will be discussing the short questions from the first chapter from Flamingo. The name of the chapter is The Last Lesson. And see dear students, I guess you can all see at the top it is written the last lesson, then it is written Flamingo, and then it is written chapter number 1, and then in the next line it is written short answer type questions, and 3 marks it is written, and word limit that has also been mentioned 30 to 40 words. So this segment is very important dear students. I will try to explain the short questions to you in this particular audio presentation. I hope you will all listen to this audio presentation. So question number 1, as you can see it is written, why were some elderly persons occupying the back benches that day? Now why were, apart from the students, why were the elderly villagers or the elderly persons, they were occupying the back benches that day? What was the reason behind that? So the answer goes like this. The elderly villagers occupied the back benches in the classroom on the day of the last lesson. They did this to show their love as well as affection for the French language and pay respect to the teacher Hamel. For two reasons, apart from the students, the elderly persons also had gathered or occupied the back benches of the classroom of Hamel for two reasons. Number one, obviously for their love and affection for the French language, and the second reason is definitely to pay their homage or to pay their tribute or respect to Hamel, because for 40 years Hamel was teaching his students. So it was like a very tragic moment for every one of them, and also for Hamel, because that was the last lesson Hamel was about to teach them all. So in love for the French language, and also in order to show their respect and love, deep love for Hamel, not only the students but also their parents and few of the important dignitaries along with the elderly persons of the elderly villagers had gathered in the inside the classroom of Hamel. So I guess it is clear. Now I am moving on to the next question. See the question dear students. Why did Franz not want to go to school that day? Now the question is, why was he reluctant? Why was he unwilling to go to school that day? What was the reason behind it? Why was he not interested to go to school that very day? Franz did not want to go to school that day as he had not prepared his lesson on participles. As already you know by this time that Franz, Franz, that is the name of the main character, the main protagonist of this story, and he is also the narrator of this story. He was not interested at all in studies. He was more interested in games and sports. He was more interested to roam in the open environment, but he was not at all interested in studies. And he had a fear at the back of his mind that if he goes to school, and obviously Hamel will scold him, because he had, practically speaking, he had no knowledge about the French grammar or the French participles. So let me move on. I am repeating the first line once again. Franz did not want to go to school that day as he had not prepared his lesson on participles. His French teacher would certainly scold him for this. So Franz wanted to avoid going to school, obviously because of the fear of getting punishment from Hamel, or because of the fear of getting scolding from Hamel. He was reluctant, or rather to say, Franz was unwilling to go to school. Now I am moving on to the very next question. As you can see, it is written, what did Franz wonder about when he entered the class that day? What he was wondering, or rather to say, what he was thinking about, because on his way to school he found that the people are all very much sad, and they had all gathered or crowded or assembled near the town hall, and they were all anxiously reading the news that was pasted on the bulletin board. So everyone was very serious. Now he was wondering, because he had no news, or rather to say, he had no information that what exactly happened, why everyone was so sad. So he was wondering that what might be the main reason, because even the school, as you know, dear students, even the school, it looked very much odd and strange, because normally hustle and bustle can be seen in the school, but that particular day everything was very quiet, very quiet, and it seems to Franz that he had entered a church, because the entire atmosphere of the school looked very quiet. So let me move on with the question, what did Franz wonder about when he entered the class that day? What he was wondering about. When Franz entered class that day, he was expecting a scolding from Hamel. He spoke very kindly, but Hamel, he spoke very kindly to Franz and asked him to sit. Franz actually thought that he will get a lot of scolding. He will be scolded by Hamel, but to his surprise, he found that Hamel spoke very kindly, very politely. He behaved with him and asked him to sit. Franz also wondered at the presence of senior villagers occupying back benches of the class. Now, while he entered the class, he was the late one. He was the late comer, as you all know. Now, while he entered the class, he found that the back benches are already been preoccupied with some of the senior most villagers. Now, he was thinking that there is a serious condition. Otherwise, so many people would not have assembled inside the classroom of Hamel. Now, what was the exact reason? He was not, he had no knowledge regarding that even at that time also. Later, it seems that Hamel will enlighten him that what was the real reason, why everyone had assembled there. Till now, Franz had no knowledge about it. So now, I am moving on to the next question, very important line, and here I quote, why did Hamel write Viva la France on the blackboard? Now, why did he write that one? Hamel wrote Viva la France on the blackboard to show his love for his country as well as for the French language. Now, he was very much disappointed. I am talking about Hamel, dear students. He was very much disappointed because of the strict instructions that came from the headquarters of Berlin, that imposition of French, imposition or ban on the use of French language, that it is something that it was very hard for a patriotic, ideal person like Hamel to digest. So it was something that is very unfortunate, and for the people of France, particularly in that small district of France by the name of Alsace, it was very hard to endure also. So Hamel, as a form of protest against this dictatorship or dictatorial rule of the Prussians, with all his power, with all his might, had written on the board in big letters, as much big he can write. Viva la France. Actually, it's a French word. If you translate it, dear students, it means long live France. Because according to him, as you know, because in the text it is written, according to Hamel, he told them on the very last lesson that French was the most beautiful, the most clearest, and the most logical language of the world. And he, according to him, its position is supreme in comparison with other languages. So he refers to French as the most beautiful language, the most logical, the most clearest of all language. And that is the reason, with all his power, with all his might, he had written on the board Viva la France, which means long live France. Why? In order to show his love for his country as well as for the French people in general. In addition to that, he was displaying his resistance to the German occupation of France. In his own way, it is his own personal way of protest against the dictatorship or against the dictatorial rule of the Prussians. And what was her individual or personalized form of protest? By writing with all his might, with all his power on the board Viva la France. For two reasons. Number one, to show his love for his country because he was a true patriot, and next one, as well as for the French people also at the same time. And remember, dear students, he was a very ideal teacher also, very serious, very disciplined, dedicated teacher also, and he loved his students a lot, and he was very anxious about them also, about their academic progress, because we find many hints in the story related to that. Now, dear students, I am moving on to question number 5. See, it is written, and here I quote, "We have all got a great deal to reapproach ourselves with," said Hamel. Comment. That means, now Hamel told this to Franz because Hamel took the blame on his shoulders of not educating Franz to that limit or to that extent, and he put the blame on Franz's family members also, who were more eager to send their kid to work rather than to learn, because there is a glimpse of child labor also we find, because many a times Franz was sent to work in the mill or the factory. So that is the reason Hamel told that his parents were also responsible for his lack of education, and he himself had took the blame on his shoulders by saying that sometimes he used to cancel the classes because of his fishing trips, and sometimes he would say to Franz to water the flowers in his garden. So he, as a very genuine teacher, he even took the blame on his own shoulders also. So now, dear students, I am moving on with the answer part. It is written, Hamel said this, as most of the people of Alsace could neither speak nor write French, but from his point of view, or rather to say from his perspective, he always gave 100%. The parents of students preferred to put them to work to earn money, and even we find a glimpse of child labor, or we find a glimpse of that when Hamel only, when he told Franz that his student Franz was sent to work on a mill or a factory, sometimes by his parents. So Hamel is actually very much disappointed because of all these things, because ultimately he felt for his students. He was anxious for the academic progress of his students, and that is the reason behind it. The parents of students preferred to put them to work to earn money, and Hamel himself did not give much importance to learning as it demanded. And important thing is that Hamel also took the blame. He also didn't give much importance to learning as actually it was demanded. Next one, how did Hamel display his love for the French language? Now how Hamel displayed his love for the French language? In what way? Hamel showed his love for the French language by telling the students that the French language was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest and the most logical of all languages. Now already I referred to it in the other question when I discussed about it, that according to Hamel, he considered French as the greatest language. Not only that, according to him, it was the most beautiful language in the world, the most clearest and the most logical of all languages. So in this way, he displayed his love for the French language. And Viva la France, writing on the board, is also an instance to show his patriotic, his deep patriotic fervor, or rather to say his deep patriotism for the French language also. Viva la France ultimately suggested long live France, as I already referred to you all, dear students. Now, next question, what was the bulletin board news that caused a change in the school? What was the news that was pasted on the bulletin board? What exactly was the news? A news had been put on the bulletin board stating that only German should be taught in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine from the next day. So already this information was been known to others. Franz was a bit unaware of this. Later, after entering the class and when Hamel presided on the podium, then after that he told that from the next day orders came from Berlin that in Alsace and Lorraine German will be taught in place of French language. So it was this is actually the news that was pasted on the bulletin board near the town hall, and all the people, they were assembled there. They looked very serious, they looked very anxious, but at that time Franz actually was unaware of this, but he realized that something wrong happened, because from that bulletin board only for the past 2 years they had received all the bad news, whether it is related with the lost battles, the orders of the commanding officer, the draft, everything, all the bad news the people of Alsace, according to Franz, received from that place. So he thought that in that morning also that there is a bad news, but he was unable to make out, neither he could read properly, maybe that is also another reason, but he saw the faces of the people and they looked very anxious. So he thought probably that there is something wrong somewhere. And later when Hamel told in front of the entire class, it becomes very, very clear. Now, let me move on to the next question. Whom did Hamel blame for Franz's inability to answer his questions? Now, who exactly Hamel blamed for Franz's inability to answer his questions? Now, Hamel blamed the habit of the people of Alsace, because Alsace, people of Alsace, they have a habit of keeping the work pending. That means learning for tomorrow, and ultimately tomorrow never comes, and finally they had to regret, and just like they are regretting right now. So I am repeating, Hamel blamed the habit of people of Alsace of putting off learning for tomorrow and not sending their children to school regularly. Regularly means, dear students, on a regular basis. He also blamed himself for neglect of learning of boys like Franz. Now he even blamed also because in case of young boys like Franz, they have a habit of neglecting their studies. They don't study seriously. Maybe that is also a reason. Now I am moving on to question number 9. What was unusual? Dear students, the meaning of unusual is strange. So what was unusual about Hamel's dress on his last day in school? What was so unusual? Because normally Hamel dresses up in a very casual attire, but that particular morning he was dressed up in his green coat, in his frill shirt, and he was wearing his little black silk cap. Okay, that is something that normally M. Hamill wear this type of clothes when there is a prize distribution ceremony in school, or when the school inspector is about to visit the school on his inspection duty. Now Franz was thinking that what is special for this day. Actually, he got to realize and know later that it is a very tragic occasion. So let me move on. See, what was unusual about M. Hamill's dress on his day in school. M. Hamill had put on his ceremonial clothes on his last day in the school. He was wearing a beautiful green coat, as I told you a few minutes earlier, a frill shirt and a little black embroidered. Embroidered means it was beautifully designed. That is the meaning of embroidered. And a little black embroidered silk cap. Next one. What tempted Franz to stay away from school? Now, what exactly tempted Franz? Remember, dear students, initially at the very beginning, in the very first few lines of this story, we find that Franz was actually, or rather to say, already late for school. So he decided to bunk his class. He decided to spend his time in the open environment because it's warm, sunny morning, and he thought of passing his time by enjoying the beauty of nature, the sights and sounds of nature, and also by watching the drilling session of the Prussian soldiers. But later he felt guilty and he resisted his temptation and thought that despite at the back of his mind he had the fear, the dread of scolding of that he might be receiving from M. Hamel, that later he haven't received. So finally he changed his mind of bunking his class and decided to go to school to attend the class. So the question is, once again I am repeating, I side by side, as by this time you will be familiar that I am giving some extra information also that will sharpen your concept regarding this chapter. So what tempted Franz to stay away from school? Franz feared a scolding at school as he had not prepared his lessons on participles because he hardly knew anything on it. French grammar, French literature is something he is very much scared of. He was dread of scolding also, and he was not interested to learn also. He was reluctant to learn, and that was the reason he had that fear of scolding at the back of his mind, because he realized that sir will ask me questions and I won't be able to answer those questions. Besides the warm, bright weather, the chirping of the birds and the sight of the marching Prussian soldiers also tempted him to stay away from school. Many reasons are there. The twittering of the birds, the bright sunny weather outside, the beautiful weather outside, and obviously the spectacle. Sight means the spectacle of the marching of the Prussian soldiers. All these things collectively, all these things, dear students, collectively, number one, the beautiful, bright, warm, sunny weather outside. Number two, the twittering of the birds. And number three, the marching or the drilling sessions or the drilling exercises of the Prussian soldiers. These three things collectively tempted him to stay away from school that particular day, but finally he made up his mind and decided to go to school. And later, by going to school, he got to know that it was the last of the French lesson. Then he realized the importance of knowing one's own mother tongue, because ultimately, according to M. Hamel, it is the key to prison. Okay, dear students, I stop my audio presentation right here. In my next audio presentation, I will be continuing with the next questions. Till then, kindly go through this audio presentation, and if there is any doubt, do let me know about it. Thank you, students. Thank you all.